Hey growers, in the last video we spent quite a bit of time looking at feeding plants on a continuous feed schedule, how important that was, how important it is reaching that right level of concentration of fertilizer when you feeding plants every time that you water so that they have a constant supply of that optimal nutrient level available to them. What I want to do on this last segment is go back and let's review a lot of the things that we talked about in the past four videos. First, on your outside gardens, unless you've been amending that soil every fall, the cardinal rule is have a soil test done. It'll cost you probably $20 to $30. It will be the best $20 or $30 that you can spend. It will then tell you exactly what your garden needs according to the crops that you plan on growing. You can bring that sheet into Blue Seal, then they can make the exact recommendations of how to apply some of these pre-made commercial formulations to reach the target levels that the lab told you that you needed to amend to be in that optimal level. So have a test done, bring those test results into Blue Seal, and then we'll show you exactly how to reach that nutrient level that's been suggested. Container growing. We saw that with containers, you've got a choice of either using a charged mix with nutrient already in it. We saw the benefits of that in the sense that it has a lot of organic compounds that we know are very beneficial to plants and plant growth and productivity. However, we saw that the nutrient load that you can put into a pot will decrease, cross a line where now the plant is deficient, and the plants will suffer as we get later into the season. So if you use a charged load, a charged mix, remember that all of them have a certain nutrient support level per gallon. With some of the lower level nutrient charges, you're looking at probably 3 days, maybe 4 days of nutrient load per gallon. Some of the high-end mixes, 5 or 6 days per gallon, but at some point you're going to have to start amending with a either a water-soluble or an organic nutrient. If you use a soil-less mix like a Lambert's, fill your pot, and then use your targeted fertilizer concentrations every time that you feed. Again, this is your continuous feed scheduling. We talked a little about EC meters and how commercial growers control and regulate their nutrient levels. For you as a home gardener, we know that you're not going to go out and buy an EC meter, nor do you have to. If we follow these basic, simple guidelines. First, if you're in seedling phase, if you're growing seedlings now and your seedlings are 2-3 inches tall, you want to be at that EC level or a nitrogen parts per million level of somewhere around 100 or an EC of around 1. One of the very simplest ways is to take a commercial fertilizer like Ajax. On the back it'll say to get to a parts per million of 100. We just use a half of a teaspoon per gallon. That's as simple as it is. If you've got seedlings growing now and you're wondering what to feed them, again, I don't represent companies, but I love this fertilizer. It's a great fertilizer. 1/2 of a teaspoon per gallon will put you right at that 100 parts per million nitrogen. Every time you feed those seedlings, they'll be very happy. the seedlings start getting a little bigger, you start getting into this range and they're growing fairly rapidly, you want to up that to that 1.5 EC or a parts per million nitrogen of 150, 175. Very simple. Just go to 1 teaspoon per gallon. That's as simple as it is. Don't make this any more difficult. Will you be at the absolute optimum level? Perhaps you're going to deviate a tiny bit, but you're going to be very close to it, and you're going to be much more precise than if you're just using random fertilizers once a week, twice a week. So, good commercial fertilizer, if you're using a Jax, very small seedlings, 1/2 a teaspoon per gallon. Seedlings get bigger, 1 teaspoon per gallon. A couple of things we didn't mention. Some of you want to grow organically. We could do another number of videos on organic growing, and people will ask me, what's a good organic fertilizer? One of my favorite organic fertilizers out there is the Neptune's line. They make 2 or 3 different products that I like. This is a rose and flowering that has a little more phosphorus. They have a tomato and veg, but one of the simplest products you can use, and it's very cost effective, is the fish and seaweed. So fish and seaweed, or tomato and veg, or the rose and flower, they're very similar. All of them can be used at a concentration of between 1 and 1.5 tablespoons per gallon per feed. That will bring you to a nitrogen level somewhere around the 125 range, and have everything else fairly well balanced for you. For you hybrid growers, one of my absolute favorite combinations of fertilizers is just using your Jax 5 or 6 times a week and doing a feed with a Neptune's 1 or 2 times a week at the same levels. Jax 1.5 a full teaspoon per gallon for plants in that actively growing veg phase. Teaspoon per gallon every time you water. When you do your Neptunes, you can do the Neptunes at tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half per gallon. That's a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half per gallon. Great combination, great way to go. As far as the charged mixes, if we're saying it may not be your best choice for container growing, the charged mixes are a very good way to go in a garden that you're growing in the ground. If you don't want to or don't have the time or the ability to have a soil test done, say where you're going to grow tomatoes or in squash hills, dig some of the soil out, put some of these nice charged mixes in, you get all the organics, you bring the nutrient load up to a much higher level, and you then mix your soil in the garden with the bag mixes, plant your plant, and your plants are going to be very happy. So anytime you want to add organic and nutrient loads to existing garden areas, these bagged products that are charged loads are a very good way to go. Because so many of you grow tomatoes, just one word about tomatoes. Tomatoes have quite a high requirement of calcium. If you've grown tomatoes and you have a problem in the summer with that black rot on the bottom of the tomato, that's not a disease. That's both a water transport problem due to irregular watering and a calcium deficiency. So any of these fertilizers that you're going to use for tomatoes, a good route to go is to get a simple calcium additive like a General Hydroponics liquid CalMag, which you can just add right in with your other fertilizer mixes to bring that calcium level up and help you prevent those blossom end rot problems with tomatoes. For you upper end growers, say of your medicinals, you'll be following a feed schedule from someone like a Jax. It will tell you as the plant gets bigger every week, your EC and nitrogen levels go up to a certain level, plateau, then you switch to another fertilizer. The Jax program is very precise and very clear and very simple on that. One final note to you container growers. I very often have people that will come in and say, I have my tomatoes and my vegetables in containers at home, and they're not doing very well. One of the first things I'll ask them is what they're growing in for a mix. Quite often they'll say, well, I just went out into my garden and I shoveled some nice rich garden soil, because we take care of the garden soil, we amend it, and we put that into the pot. Why aren't my plants doing well? One of the things that happens when you put garden soil into a container is that because the particles are so fine, as you water, they will have a tendency of compressing, compacting, compressing, compacting, and you're basically seeing that volume in the pot decrease and the soil getting much tighter, which impedes virtually every function that has to go on around the root ball. So do not use garden soil to fill containers that you're going to grow in. Commercial mixes like LN3's Pro Mix are a very specific combination of things like peat moss and perlite that give you the proper ratio of water retention to aeration. They'll give you a much higher performing product, and you'll see much better results with anything that you're growing in a container with a commercially developed mix, again, like a Lambert's, like a Pro Mix. So no garden soil in containers. We've covered a lot of territory, and we're also trying to cover a subject that you literally could spend a couple of years in college studying and then do your PhD thesis in and still not cover everything. So we've used some generalizations here. We've fuzzed the science a tiny bit in areas to give you a solid idea without getting too deeply into the science. Hopefully this has answered some of your questions, and again, as always, if you have any questions, you can either contact me, I think through the YouTube site. I'm new at this, so bear with me, or simply by calling Blue Seal, and they can easily put you in touch with me. My function is to be a science resource for you to help you grow the best products that you possibly can grow. So, until the next video, again, in these difficult times, stay safe, stay healthy, be good to each other, and remember, you need to know what your plants need to grow.